I was crying like a baby back there. That song was The Stand. Reminds me, takes me back to when I first started walking with Jesus. Man, he's done so many things since then. And I know he's not done because I'm not perfect yet. And neither are you. So I want to start with a verse that I ended with the last time I preached. And it's Hebrews 13:8. And it says this: Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Here it goes again. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. And what that means is that God is still the God of miracles. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling it. I've been feeling it all morning, that God's going to do something amazing today. Because I still believe that God is still the God of miracles. So I'm calling on the God of Jacob, whose love endures through generations. His promises are faithful through generations and generations and generations. I'm calling on the God of Moses, who opened up the ocean. I'm calling on the God of Mary, whose favor rests upon the lowly. I'm calling on the God of David, who made the shepherd boy courageous. I know that with God, all things are possible. God is still the God of miracles. Today, like my daughter mentioned, if you didn't know that she was my daughter, now you know. Just a family business that we do here. That's my wife. The worship leader is my cuñado. My cuñada is missing. I don't know where she's at. If you're watching online, you know what I'm saying? So we're beginning a new series called Are You There, God? Based on the book of Esther. And I know that many of you already know the story, but I'm going to try to dig something different out of it. Sometimes we read the word and we just go through it and we skip the little details, the big details. The title of this talk, When It Seems That God is Silent. Let me give you a little moment to kind of like feel that. When it seems that God is silent. Is anyone there? Don't raise your hand. Is anyone there? The year is 468 BC. And most of the Jewish people are scattered throughout the 127 provinces of the Persian Empire. They're scattered people because a little over 100 years earlier, God allowed them to be overtaken by the Babylonian Empire. Then the Persian Empire rises and conquers Babylon. So I'm going to bring up the people that are in the story of Esther. The first person we're introduced to is King Xerxes. This guy is brutal, right? He's power hungry, he's perverted, and he considers himself a god. And if his name sounds familiar, yes, I'm talking about the same Xerxes portrayed in that awesome, amazing movie called 300. This is Sparta. Got a poster in my office. Trying to get a tattoo, but my wife said no. And I got to listen to her once in a while. Not all the time. No, all the time. Sorry, babe. Xerxes is full of himself. And the story begins with Xerxes throwing himself 180-day party across the entire empire to celebrate his greatness. Este vato. You know what I'm saying? 180 days. That's 6 months of party. Just imagine, all of Mexico partying. Because I'm trying to show off, show off that I can. He basically wants to show off. And then he throws a 7-day feast for just him and his top officials, all his homies. He's like, hey, homie, come on. My road dogs, you know what I'm saying? This party is 7 days of drunken debauchery. You guys know what the definition of debauchery is? Extreme indulgence in bodily pleasures, especially sexual pleasures. In other words, orgies. And in the last day, he gets this crazy idea to bring out his queen, to show her off. According to Jewish tradition, this request came from an argument among the men at the feast as to which country had the most beautiful women. So he tries to prove a point, and he asks for his wife to come out, to show her off to all his drunken, perverted friends. I was like, what? Come on, bro. Right? It's not specifically said, but the implication is that the queen was expected to display herself in an immodest way. It meant that she needed to get naked in front of these men to show her off. This is where we're introduced to Queen Vashti. She doesn't want to just be a piece of meat for all the drunken, perverted friends, and she courageously says, Chale, no. As you can imagine, that doesn't go very well because nobody denies Xerxes. So she's removed as queen. And she's never seen again next to him. So this opened up a need for a new queen, and one of Xerxes' officials suggests that they look throughout the 127 provinces for beautiful women to replace Vashti. The plan was to assemble a harem from the most beautiful women the land had, and to choose from those beautiful women to be his next queen. This is sort of a Miss Persian Empire contest, the first ever The Bachelor. And as they're looking through all the 127 provinces, we're introduced to two Jewish cousins. The first one is Mordecai. That's your fill-in right there. Your next one. Mordecai. He's a Jewish man whose parents were probably taken as slaves, and now he's a poor peasant and who is raising his orphan cousin named Esther. Esther's a beautiful woman. Like beautiful, like gorgeous, like amazing, like beautiful, like woo! Almost as beautiful as my amazing wife. Woo! I still do that every morning. Even in the morning. Woo! So Esther doesn't really have a choice. But to go into the king's harem with a bunch of other beautiful women, and I can imagine Esther asking, are you there, God? Why are you allowing this? Don't you care about me? Don't you care what might happen to me? Are you there? Can you picture that? They were conquered, scattered. Now she's taken into a harem. Are you there, God? So she's put in a 1-year beauty program before she ever gets to see the king or be with the king. She was at the spa for a year. She's basically at the spa for a year. So every day Mordecai checks in on her, and when the women of Xerxes' harem get into the garden, Mordecai says to her, she's like, hey, I got in the download, no? Hey, don't tell anyone you're Jewish. Now the time comes for Esther to get her night with the king. She walks in, and Xerxes says, wow, she's hot. Beautiful. And the story says that he loved her more than any other. She eventually becomes Queen Esther. Sounds like a novela, right? Netflix, right? Episode 1. You know? And you stay up all night watching the whole 10 seasons. 7-day party. The last player I want to introduce is a Persian official named Haman. Haman is an advisor to the king who is power hungry and greedy and evil, and as evil as the king. But more on him in a moment. So let's jump to the plot. This is a story. This is like a movie. Don't fall asleep. Go get some coffee. You're getting bored. So here's the plot. The story of Esther is developing, but something significant happens that becomes important later in the story. Here it is. Mordecai saves the king. Every day, to be close to Esther, Mordecai hangs out outside the gate palace. One day, he overhears 2 officials plotting an assassination of King Xerxes, and he tells Esther to warn the king, and she does, and the assassination is stopped. So Mordecai saves the king. Wow! And chapter 3 begins, and you had expected that this would be the Mordecai moment, a moment to get a reward, and he to be lifted out of him being a peasant, maybe placed in the palace, but it doesn't happen. He's overlooked, and the reward actually goes to Haman. Can you imagine Mordecai asking, "Are you there, God? Why aren't good people prospering and bad people are? Are you there, God?" And the story gets even darker from there. Here's your next villain. Haman plots to kill all the Jews. Each day when Haman would enter the palace to advise the king, he would walk past the gate where Mordecai sat to be close to Esther. And when he walked up, because he had such a high position of power, everyone would stand and even bow before him except one person, Mordecai. Now, it could be because he was Jewish and, like Daniel, refused to bow down to anyone but God. But it's more likely because Haman was an Agagite, and his people and the Jewish people were enemies for 1,000 years. And because of this, Haman hated Mordecai and all of the Jewish people. So he plans to find a way. He plans a way to get the king to sign into law that all Jewish people would be attacked and killed in every province. Genocide. He manipulates the king. He doesn't tell him what people he would be killed. He just says, "Hey, king, let me solve a problem for you. An entire group of people don't love you and worship the way you should. Let me handle it for you." And Xerxes gives them the green light. So there's a new law that's sent to all 127 provinces. And you can imagine the fear in knowing that you're going to get killed. Can you imagine all the Jewish people collectively asking, "Are you there, God? Don't you care? Don't you see what's about to happen to us? I don't understand. I thought we were your chosen people. Where are you, God?" And you might be asking that right now. Where are you? I've been there many times. And this is where, here's your next fill-in. Mordecai and Esther create a plan. All the Jewish people were freaking out. Can you imagine? Hey, they're going to come after us. So Mordecai sends word to Esther what Haman had done and what will happen to all the people, and ask her to do something about it, Esther. And she sends a word back and she says, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I can do. I don't even see the king that much. And if I go without being invited, I can be killed. Esther 4:13-17 says this. Then Mordecai sent word back to Esther, just because you live in the king's palace, don't think that out of all the Jewish people, you alone will escape. If you keep quiet at this time, someone else will help and save the Jewish people. But you and your father's family will all die. And who knows? You may be chosen queen for such a time as this. Maybe the valley that you're going through is a preparation, a setup for something amazing in your life. Let me say it again. Maybe it has for my life. The valley that you're going through is a preparation, a setup for something amazing in your life. Verse 15. Then Esther sent his answer to Mordecai. Go and tell all the Jewish people in Susa together, for my sake, fast. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night and day. I and my servant girls will also fast. Then I will go to the king, even though it's against the law. And if I die, I die. So Mordecai went away and did everything Esther had told him to do. If I die, I die. So after 3 days of prayer and fasting, Esther gets the courage and the faith to go. She walks in not knowing if she will be killed. And what happens, it was amazing. The king extends his gold scepter. And what that means is that it's a sign that she is welcome to approach him. He's pleased to see her and says, what do you want? Ask anything, even up to half of the kingdom. Talk about favor, right? She says, let me have a banquet with you tomorrow. And I would tell you what I want. And let's invite Haman. And the king says, then that night something else significant happens. Here's your next feeling. The king can't sleep. Episode 2. When we can't sleep, we might get up and watch a little Netflix or maybe look at our phone and scroll social media and all that stuff. But the king doesn't have any of that. So he asked his servant to read the Chronicles of the Persian kingdom. And what that is, it's a book that has recorded everything that has happened during his reign. And guess what story the servant turns to read? The story of Mordecai saving his life from assassination. Oh. Like, huh. And the king asked, what reward did we ever give this man? And the servant says, none. It was overlooked. And the king says, let's do something about it. So the next day he calls Haman and asks him, if someone has served the king in such a way, what reward should I give him? And Haman was thinking that the king was talking about him. And he said, the king should give him one of his royal robes and one of his royal horses and parade him through the street saying, the king delights in this man. And the king says, great idea. I love it. Go and do that for Mordecai. What? Haman had to parade him. Like he was walking with the horse, with Mordecai with the robe and the royal horse, and he was walking with a robe around town. The king delights in this man. You can imagine Haman's anger burned to kill Mordecai, right? So the banquet with Esther comes. And the king asks Esther what she wants again. And this is where Haman's plot is exposed and he is executed. That's your next villain. Next episode. And Esther says, someone has manipulated you, king, and planned to kill me and all of my people. And the king is furious and asks, who? And she looks at Haman and says, him. And the king is furious, and he knows that the law can't be taken back even by him. And in a dramatic twist of fate, he has Haman killed, impaled on the very pole Haman created for Mordecai. And what does impaled mean? Is when there's a pole and they boom. Woo! All of Haman's possessions are given to Mordecai, including his job. Mordecai becomes second in command in all of Persia and is able to write another law with the king's blessing that the Jewish people can now defend themselves on the day of this attack. Amazing. So I want to close with quickly looking at personal applications. How are we going to apply this? What did we learn from this story today? First, I want you to see this. Here's the next villain. God's silence is not absence. Think about the story. Think about all those episodes we've been watching right now. I know it's like a movie. I could have been a director. God's silence is not absence. God's silence is not absence. Question. Has anyone besides me ever felt like God wasn't answering your prayers? Let me ask it again. Has anyone besides me ever felt that God wasn't answering your prayers, and that you're praying and praying and nothing happens? At times like that makes you wonder if God is even there. We can start to even ask, are you even real? Or do you even care? I got no food, God. I got no job. Yet, the story of Esther shows us that even in the silence, God's sovereign hand is always moving. Just think of all the seemingly coincidental events in the story of Esther. And if there wasn't a 180-day party that ended with another 7-day drunk fast that caused Xerxes to call Queen Vashti to show her off, and if she would have not refused, the king would have and never been banished, then Xerxes would have never looked for another queen, and Esther would have never had favor with the king. Si no hubiera pasado eso, esto no hubiera pasado. If this situation over here didn't happen, then this wouldn't have happened. If Mordecai had not been at the outer gate at the exact moment of the assassination attempt and plot, and he overheard it, he had not been overlooked by the king after he saved him, he would have already received his reward and not been part of a bigger story and position of God had for him. Things that make you go, Sometimes you pray for gold, but he wants to give you diamonds. If the king had not had holy insomnia that night before the banquet with Esther, and if he had not asked to read the records of his reign, if he had not read the exact story of the assassination attempt that Mordecai stopped, then it would have been Mordecai on that pole. So all this had to happen. Me going to prison had to happen. Me getting deported had to happen in order for you to be sitting here today. That needed to happen in order for me to be here. The valley you're going through has to happen. Things in your life that might not make sense now will one day make sense because God is there with you. None of these events are in the story are coincidental. That was God. God was present. God was orchestrating. God was actively working through a bunch of ordinary, seemingly coincidental events that were not coincidental at all. Even when it seemed like God was silent, he was actually very, 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 very involved. And I want you to know that God is not absent in your life. Even when it seems that he's silent, even at times where we think that he's distant and not working, God is present. He's working and he's caring for his people. Romans 8:28 says this: we are confident that God is able to orchestrate everything to work towards something good and beautiful when we love him and accept his invitation to live according to his plan. Even through the bad things in this broken world that God doesn't cause. Because we're always like, God, why are you doing this to me? Well, you probably made some bad decisions over here, right? Anyways. But we blame God. The troubles he doesn't create. He's still orchestrating. He's sovereign. Yes, sometimes silent, but he is always working through them for our good. Here's your next fill-in. God's silence is not indifference. God's silence is not indifference. Have you ever felt that God isn't doing as much as he could? I mean, through the power of his word, he created everything. Let there be light, there was light. Let there be boom, boom, pause. Have you ever felt that God isn't doing as much as he could? If he really has all the power, why isn't he using it? Why isn't he intervening? Why isn't he fixing the problem or changing the circumstances? Why, God? Why? 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 I know some of you felt like, I was one of them. And in these moments, I know that we could all be tempted to think that God is indifferent. We can think he's uninvolved and uninterested. Let me say this, God's inactivity is never apathy. He is not indifferent to your pain, your loss, your troubles, your confusion, or your fear. The story of Esther reminds us that he's always with us. He's always working. Lamentations 3:22 and 23 says this, certainly the faithful love of the Lord hasn't ended. Certainly God's compassion isn't through. They're renewed every morning. They're renewed every morning. They're renewed every morning. Great is your faithfulness. God is faithful even when the world is harmful. God is loving even when the world is hurtful. And how do I know that? Because of Jesus. Every time I look at Jesus, I know I am loved by God. When I look to Jesus, I know God is actively pursuing me. When I look to Jesus, I know God cares about me, even when I don't see it or understand it. When I look to Jesus, I know God loved me. God works in both the extraordinary and the ordinary. Church, I believe that God still heals. I believe that God still does miracles. I believe those miracles are often seen in the longer story of our lives, just like in the book of Esther in both ways, the extraordinary and the ordinary. 1 Corinthians 12:6 says this, God works in different ways, but it's the same God who does the work in all of us. Church, let's be a church and a people that still believe for and pray for miracles. Let's be a church and a people that look for God's presence and goodness and grace in the ordinary details of our lives. Can you please stand? I'm going to close with the same verse I started with. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. And what that means is that God is still the God of miracles. So I'm calling on the God of Jacob. I'm calling on the God of Mary. I'm calling on the God of Joseph. I'm calling on the God of Esther. I'm calling on the God of Moses. I'm calling on the God of David. And I know with God all things are possible. even when you don't feel it, He's working. Even when you don't see it, He's working. Because He never stops. He never stops working. Let's declare that with faith today. In the middle of our circumstances, in the middle of our grief, in the middle of our worry, in our anxiety, in our pain, and in our trouble, let's have faith today to believe that God is still working. Lord, in the name of Jesus, in the name of Jesus, I believe You're here and that You're working in the hearts of people today. I know You're speaking to Your people today. I know You're speaking to Your sons and daughters today. I know, Lord, that people are going to walk out of those doors full of faith, believing that they're not abandoned, that they're not forgotten, that You are still working in their lives, even when they don't feel it. You're working. And You never stop working, Lord. In Jesus' name. Amen.